We'll divide the session into three. Firstly, we have the first section, which will talk about why is storytelling important. We'll talk a bit about the human storytelling DNA. And then we'll go into the introduction of business storytelling, which I think would be relevant for all of you as startup founders and entrepreneurs. And finally, we'll talk about the practical aspect, which is the key to good visual storytelling. And over here, I'll share some design principles that would be able to hopefully help you to be able to create better visuals at the end of this session. We also have a short time for Q&A towards the end. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat and I will be able to answer some of them later on. And then if there's time, I will also give you a very short demo tour about Piktochat and see if you might find it helpful for you in your work. Now let's jump straight to the first section without any delay. We want to talk about why is storytelling important. Now let me begin by asking you this question because today's session is called the key to good visual storytelling. Now the word visual storytelling, it's actually a word that is not very familiar to a lot of people. Some of you might have heard of it before, but some of you have never heard of it before. What does it actually mean? So let's see what this term actually means. And I have some bad news because if you look up in the dictionary, the term visual storytelling does not exist in any dictionary. It is not in Oxford, it's not in Merriam-Webster's dictionary. But visual storytelling is not that distance from us. So I think a good way for us to understand this term visual storytelling is to take a step back and look into the word storytelling first. Okay, brace yourself. This is going to be a detour, but I'm going to show you this hierarchy of needs, which all of us are probably very familiar with. Now, this table or pyramid you can see here is coined by an American psychologist, Abraham Maslow, in 1943 in his paper titled A Theory of Human Motivation. And in his paper, he wrote that there are 8 levels of human needs, which he then later simplified into 5 of them. You've probably seen this in your school, in your college. They talk about the different needs from the psychological needs, which is the basic needs at the bottom. We need food, water, and warmth to survive. And then there is the second level of needs, which is safety needs, a sense of security and safety. The third level is belongingness and love needs, where we crave for love, connection, and relationship with others. And then the fourth level is esteem needs, where we want to have a sense of prestige and accomplishment in the group. And finally, all of us desire to reach this, which is self-actualization needs, where we want to achieve the feeling of fully unlocking our full potential. So if you look at this diagram, you notice that the bottom is the most important one, which is the basic needs, and it's very crucial for survival. And for you to reach the top, you need to make sure that you accomplish all the other levels beneath it. So I know that you're familiar with this. Now, because we are in the topic of storytelling today, out of these 5 levels, can you guess where storytelling will fall into? Right? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat. So I'm going to open up the chat and just to see where do you think storytelling fall into in this pyramid of hierarchy of needs? If you have any thoughts, just feel free to drop it there. And thank you so much for also introducing hi, Kate and Becky, Mike. Right, so if you have any thoughts, just drop in there. Laura said all of them. All right, any other thoughts? Where do you think it would fall in? Esteem needs. All right, self-actualization. Great. So we have different answers here, right? And I'm sure that by the end of it, you'll be able to know where it is. But I'll give you the answer right away. The storytelling actually falls under the category of belongingness and love needs. Now, why is that so? I want you to picture this with me. When you see someone, for example, you see me today for the first time, and you perhaps enjoy what I'm saying right now, and you want to start a friendship or relationship with me on LinkedIn, right? So what would you do? Firstly, you would probably come to me after this session on LinkedIn, and you would tell me more about yourself, and we can exchange some stories and experience, and you can get to know me better in my professional work as well. And then hopefully, as we do that, we'll be able to have a friendship or a relationship with them. Now, all of us as humans, we use stories to communicate. And storytelling is crucial because we use stories to communicate with one another. Now, this definition from Oxford Dictionary, when the word communication, it actually means to exchange information, news, ideas, or feelings, or in the context of a relationship, to communicate is to be able to understand and talk about yours, own, or other people's thoughts and feelings. So based on this definition that you can see right now on the screen, we can conclude that one-way communication means bad communication. Because in a communication, as you can see, involved. One is the communicator, and then you also have the other side, which is the recipient. The communicator is the one who would share information, maybe acting as the source of information, while on the other side, there's the recipient, the one who receives information that is being shared by the communicator. So the process of communication starts to happen when the communicator shares an information and the recipient receives the information and responds as a result, either by performing a certain action, maybe nodding the head, saying yes, saying I agree with you, maybe reacting to shared information in certain ways, or maybe doing something after that. So when the recipient doesn't give any response, we can see that this is when bad communication is happening. It could be because the recipient doesn't understand what the communicator is saying, or they just couldn't relate with the piece of information that is being shared. So they don't even bother to try to understand. Now that we know this table here, we need to ask this question. So what is the recipe for a good communication? Because we all want to make sure that we want to avoid bad communication as much as possible. And especially myself in marketing, that's an important thing. We want to make sure that we communicate the right message to people. And over 7.5 years of doing marketing, I believe the answer lies in this one word, which is story. Story. Now, what makes a good story? And I want to bring us into a very important concept to understand. It's called the Aristotle's Poetics. Now, according to Aristotle's Poetics, there are 3 main elements of every good story. There's no particular order for this. So I'll just start off with the first one, which is ethos. Ethos, or also known as credibility. Now, in this, we need to establish credibility for the hero in your story. When you do this, it serves as a common ground to connect to your audience, to the hero in your story. Without credibility, your audience may not even entrust what you're saying. So for example, right now, I'm telling you, oh, I just met this guy. His name is Tommy. And you might ask, who is Tommy? Why are you suddenly talking about Tommy in the middle of your presentation? Why should I listen to this story about Tommy? But it would make a difference if I give you some background story about Tommy. So for example, I met Tommy 6 months ago at Republic of Work in one of the sessions here. And after he came to our session, he started to see the importance of visual storytelling, and he started using Piktochat after that. Now, you and Tommy might share something in common because you know that Tommy is a participant and also someone in Republic of Work. Now, this is just a made-up character. I'm not sure if there's a Tommy here, but because I just gave you the story, you now have a reason to listen to what I am about to share because now there's credibility. So that is ethos. Now, the second is logos or logic. Now that you're listening to me, it doesn't mean that you're convinced about what I have to say. Well, this is where we all need logos or logic. We need facts, we need data, we need science to support our story. Otherwise, our story will make no sense at all. And the third one is pathos or emotion. Now, one great example I think about is this. Imagine if you are giving out a brochure about diabetes to the public, right? And in this brochure, you want to explain the cause of diabetes and how do you prevent it. So you spend a lot of time gathering the information, you design a beautiful brochure, and you want to make sure that people are aware of the risk of diabetes. But you pass it to a person and the person just dismisses the brochure. And that will make us feel all dejected. See, it's not our fault. It's not the brochure's fault. It's not the guy's fault. So how can we do it differently if you want to tap into the pathos, the emotional side of things? Now, one good way is this. Let them know the risks of it to get their attention. So think about this. I have a friend. His name is Rodney. He's about in his 50s to 60s. And he has a few grandchildren. One of his grandsons loves swimming. And so his grandson asked him to bring him to swim. Now, Rodney wasn't living a healthy lifestyle, so he was a bit embarrassed to go to swim because of his physical shape. He wasn't sure. He hadn't been swimming in a long time. He wasn't sure if he's fit enough to do it. And then one day he saw an online health program about weight loss. And he thought to himself, you know what? I should take this 10 weeks program, because by doing this, at the end of it, I will have the confidence to bring my grandson to a swim. And the program looks simple and easy, so he took it. By the end of the 10 weeks, Rodney has lost 17% of his body weight. And that same amount is also shown to reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 85%. Now, World Health Organization said that diabetes is the 9th leading cause of death in 2019. And in fact, with COVID and the pandemic, diabetes was still in the top 10 list for causes of death in 2021. But not a lot of people are aware of the danger of diabetes, and they're not aware that they're at risk of getting diabetes, including you and myself. That's the end of my story. Now, I wanted to think about this. You just listened to a story about Rodney, my friend, but without realizing it, you are also probably more curious now about diabetes. That is the power of storytelling. You can evoke emotion for people to be able to understand the importance of your subject. All I did was tell a story, allowing you to relate to Rodney, and then giving you some facts about diabetes. I applied ethos, pathos, and logos. So that can make a compelling story. And now I want to add a new element in this Aristotle's poetics. It is also called kairos. Now, kairos is a Greek word for right time or timeliness. It means putting something in the right timing. And the 4 elements, I believe, are what makes something we call business storytelling. Now, we're going to go into business storytelling now, because we've talked about the importance of storytelling. Now you want to know, why is business storytelling so important, especially for all of you who are running your own startups or your own organization. So I've gone through the detour, and I hope you can bear with me as we go through this. Now that you know the importance of storytelling, we want to look into what is business storytelling. And thankfully, this time around, it is actually quite simple. Well, business storytelling is the act of communication that happens within a business context. All of us can relate to this. So you remember the diagram I shared earlier about the communicator and the recipient? You see, in communication, we have the communicator. But in business storytelling, this communicator could be the employee or the employer, could be the company or the brand. And the communicator will then share something to the recipient. The recipient in business storytelling are potentially the employee, the stakeholders, the clients, or the customers. These are the people that you want to speak to. Similarly, we talk about the importance of good communication. Now, when the recipient gives some good response, we know that that is good communication. But in business storytelling, the difference is this. The response or the feedback from the recipient is measured by business metrics. There's numbers involved in this. There's engagement, there's activation, there's retention. You get clients from this. You win an investment from this. So that's the difference between this type of storytelling in the business. Then you might wonder, does that mean we have to tell stories every single time to whoever you meet? Well, the answer is both yes and no. So just to help you to understand, how do you apply storytelling in business? Now, if you want your customers or your clients or your boss to react in a certain way, and we're talking about storytelling in business now, it's a yes. But there's also a different type of storytelling, which is a storytelling that you see in the movies. It's a more creative way, right? What are the differences between the two? Now, storytelling in business has ethos, logos, pathos, and kairos. It is not just about the emotion. It has to have a balance between the 4 elements. While when you watch a movie and you see a great storytelling, a lot of it involves the idea of having drama, suspense, and the more you have those elements, the better it is. Storytelling in business, however, has a different purpose, because the purpose is to unfold theories, to simplify a complicated subject, perhaps to clarify something that is not clear, or to notify your audience about an important subject. while the storytelling in movies is to give the audience an experience. The goal of storytelling in business is also different because it is to either motivate someone to do something, to activate them, or to engage them, or all of the above. And the goal of storytelling in movies is merely to create memories or associations to certain subjects or topics. Now that you can see the difference between different types of storytelling, I hope that you begin to understand that business storytelling is something that is very relevant to all of us. But what does it look like? Well, these are a few ways of how business storytelling can look like. They can be in the form of reports, pitch decks, business proposals, and any form of internal communication. To simply summarize this, business storytelling is storytelling that influences business actions. Remember the story of Tommy earlier that I shared with you about him? Now, as a communicator, in order to tell a story, you need to first build a connection with the recipient, and that is your audience. You want them to listen to your story, and even better, to make a decision based on your story. Here's a really interesting statistics. It says here that 75% of chief experience officers make major strategic decisions about the future of their business with their heart. Now, I know it's very hard to connect these two words, strategic and heart, because when you think about strategic, you think about data, statistics, and numbers. But how can you make a decision purely from the heart? Now, I'm not a science expert or a biology expert, but I think a great way to understand this is to actually tap on the human brain. You see, in the human brain, there are two parts. The outer part, which is known as the neocortex. And this is the part that controls rational and analytical points of view. And then you have the inner layer, which is the limbic system. This is the part of brain that controls your behavior and decision making. The basal ganglia, which is a small part of the brain, controls your habit, and this lies within the limbic system. This is the heart of your brain. And when you think about this, I can't help but see this circle and to be reminded by a golden circle by Simon Sinek. If you read the book Start With Why, probably all of you have heard about him, you will understand what I'm talking about. Simon Sinek talks about the what, the how, and the why we do something. Now, when I look into these two visuals together, and I think about it, when we think about what we want to do, we use the neocortex. It is the rational part of our brain, right? The analytical side of things. And then when we think about the how and the why we do certain things, we use our limbic system. Now, do you know what powers up our limbic system to help us to make behavior and decision? It's a hormone called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is something that you've probably heard of, but to simplify it, it's the love or the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is released in our brain when we feel safe and unobserved. This same hormone is released when we feel happy, we feel calm, we feel trusting towards someone. Now, people won't remember the numbers, the facts, the data that you're going to give them, but they remember how they feel when they hear about the facts and the numbers and all of those things. So if you want to deliver an impactful story, you have to connect to your audience's heart. Now, a good way to do that is by this book by Nancy Duarte. So Nancy Duarte is a storyteller expert. You can look her up on LinkedIn. You'll be able to find a lot of resources. And in her book, Resonate, she talks about these 4 ways to create a connection with your audience. The first thing she says is to genuinely like your audience, right? So you need to like your audience genuinely, because otherwise you won't have the motivation to get to know them. And then the second thing is to get to know them and find a common ground. Thirdly, she talks about finding the right medium and the right delivery method. And her fourth part is what I want to highlight. She says that we have to create a star moment. Star moment stands for something they'll always remember. Something they'll always remember. And according to Nancy, how do we create a star moment? She says this, that star moment can be created by 4 different things. Firstly, it's a memorable dramatization. Secondly, it's repeatable sound bites. catchphrases that people can remember. Third thing she talks about is evocative visual. And the fourth thing is emotive storytelling. Now, you probably know where I'm going from here now. I want to highlight the third part, which is evocative visual. That itself is where we find visual storytelling. I know it took a while to get to where we are today, but I think it's important for us to at least understand the concept of visual storytelling and also business storytelling. So now that we've covered the psychological part of it, the science part of it, we'll come to the practical part of it, which is the key to good visual storytelling. And this is the part that I think will be able to help all of us here to learn how to do that better, regardless of the tool that we're using to create all of this. So we talk about evocative visual. What does that look like? Now, there are two ways to think about this. An evocative visual is a visual that leaves a great impression. It gets into the head of your audience. When they see it, it makes sense. They're attracted to it right away. It is also a visual that passes your message accurately, and it actually influences your audience to make a decision. Essentially, what evocative storytelling is to using design principles to tell meaning through visual, story, and data elements. So how do you create such a powerful visual, an evocative visual? Well, I'll show you 6 different design principles that you can use to create a powerful and evocative visual. There are 6 different design principles. Firstly is contrast, hierarchy, proximity, flow, unity, and white space. Now, it will take forever if I go through all of them one by one. So in this session, I will just focus on the first one. And I think that's probably the most essential one that we can take home today, which is the idea of contrast. Now, why is contrast important when it comes to visuals? Because contrast, firstly, it can spark imagination. It can help you to think, and we'll see how it's going to look like practically shortly. Contrast also shows the gap, the difference between 2 different ideas that you have. And lastly, contrast can also do this, which is contrast guides the eye and the heart of your audience. Now, there are different ways that you can create contrast. So the best way to think about this is you can create contrast by showing 2 different scenarios, 2 different sizes, or 2 different weights, right? These things are the opposite of each other. And you can create contrast in your visual elements by using photos, background, text, colors, and data that are in contrast with one another. So we'll look into it one by one. We talk about the 3 roles of contrast, which is to spark imagination, to show the gap, and to guide the heart. So let me show you a first example about how does it spark imagination. Now, one way to do that is to create contrasting images, right? Now, you can see this picture here right now that I have. It shows winter. So for example, if I am presenting a quarterly report presentation, it's coming to the end of the year now, so I have to present something. And this year's revenue, for example, my startup hasn't been doing really well. So I put up this picture, of winter in my presentation to my company to visualize the idea of winter is coming. It's going to be tough. And then now I put in a different image. And you can see this image. It depicts a different story. In fact, it feels more heartwarming because it is 3 friends cycling together and going through something together. They're in the journey together. Now, I can now say that I want to also show that the future that we're going to build in the company, we have to do it together. Despite the tough time that is coming, right? We can go through it together, especially in times like this. Second example, here's a picture of an empty desk of 1 person, all right? And then on the next slide, I put a different image, which is a team that is working together. Now, this shows a message about teamwork. You might be wondering, why are you talking to me about this method? Well, because someone used this, and her name is Beth Comstock. She's the former vice chair of General Electric. This is the technique that she has used in her presentations. Whenever she has to present her strategy to the company, whether it is internally or externally, she would use the contrasting images to be able to tell her story more effectively. Now, if you want to read more about this case study, about the way she uses this type of presentation, you can read more about it in the Harvard Business Review article that is linked here. You also get the link to my presentation at the end of this, so you can just feel free to click on that to find out more. Now, let's talk about how does contrast shows the gap. Now, contrast shows the gap by also turning data that you have, two different data, big numbers, into something that has meaning. You see, when you're telling data or numbers, you're not just simply blurting out those numbers. You want to tell a story with these numbers. There are a few ways to do that, right? The first one is you can compare numbers into a number of similar value in a different context. So for example, you can see the word 34 million visuals here. Now, Piktochat has about 11 million users right now. And all these 11 million users have created a total of 34 million visuals in total. That's a lot of visuals, right? But does this number affect you at all? Probably not. Now, what if I tell you that upon calculation, one visual is equivalent to an A4 size paper? So the total size of 34 million visuals would add up to about 10,000 kilometers. Now, that is equivalent to the distance of where I am right now in Malaysia to somewhere in Luxembourg. Now, you would think, wow, that is a lot of visuals. So by simply converting your data into something familiar like distance, it gives you a visualization of how big the number is. And you can use this as well when you're presenting data and numbers so that it doesn't have to be dry. Another way to do this is to explain the grandness of scale. You can contrast your numbers with items of familiar size. So there's this website called One Pixel Wealth. It is a website that visualizes how rich Jeff Bezos is by comparing his wealth to other data such as the median US household income. And when you look at this GIF that is going on, you can see how it actually shows the perspective of the 185 billion US dollar that Jeff Bezos has, which is a lot of money, as compared to a median US household income. So you can use the grandness of scale to also show your numbers. Last but not least, you can also build context by providing more data that supports your argument. So for example, you can see here, this is actually a campaign by Round Foundation. It is called The Clock is Ticking. Now, in this campaign, they want to build awareness for the issues that are happening in Long Island. And as you can see here, they are talking about the progress to the goal of preserving 3,500 acres per year for 10 years. But with the current rate, they will only reach half of the goal by the end of the 10th year. That is a long time. So when you give some supporting data of how many acres they can preserve in a year, they are able to build an urgency of the matter that we don't have to wait for 10 years to make this happen. Let's do it now. That is one way contrast can also create emotion and to communicate your data more effectively. Finally, we talk about the last role of contrast, which is to guide the eyes and the heart. Now, think about this, and as you see here, through contrast, you can create something called a visual hierarchy. And this is basically a way of providing a reading flow to your audience. Now, what do I mean by this? If you look at the screen right now, you can see here I had put certain words in there. Now, imagine if I'm asking you to think about what is the most important thing here. You might not be able to identify it because all of them are in the same size, they're in the same font, they're in the same weight, they're in the same color. So you wouldn't know which text you should look at first. Now, what happens if I do something like that? Can you see the difference? All I did was changing the size. Now, your eyes are directly attracted to text number 1 first, and then it will smoothly go to number 2, 3, and 4. So visuals can guide the eye and the heart of the audience. It's not only the size you can play with, you can also play with font weight. For example, now I bold text number 2 to also let you know that text number 2 is more important than 3 and 4. So as simple as bolding numbers, you're able to actually guide the heart and the mind of people. You can also use colors to direct the eyes. You can see a difference between number 1 and number 2, and perhaps your eye is drawn to number 2 first because it's bright. Colors can also be used to tell a story. So for example, if I switch it up right now, I put green on number 1 and red in text number 2. And these are two opposing colors. Now, when you look at this, you might be thinking that, this is a comparison. Maybe you're telling me that number 1 is much better than number 2, right? So this is how you can use colors to also tell your story. There are also different shades of colors you can use to create a heat map. It can be the same color, but you can just lower the opacity to create a heat map and to show the importance of it. Now, on top of colors, there's something also called proximity. What is proximity? Now look at this again. Now when I group certain elements together, I also can provide a clear guide to my audience. In this case, you can see that text number 4 belongs together with text number 1, while text number 2 and 3 are probably in the same group. This is proximity, when you bring your elements and group them together. Next is shapes. Shapes can also tell a lot of story, as simple as any shapes that you can think about. Now look at these shapes. You can see 3 circles here and 1 square. Through this shape, I can tell you a story about perhaps inequality, because there's 3 compared to 1. Or I can also talk about progress, that there's only 1 step left towards our goal, where all of them would become circles. These are all true basic shapes that I'm using to tell story. So that is the role of contrast, to guide the eyes of your audience. We talked about the heart earlier as well, and I thought of just adding this important note about something called color psychology. You've probably heard about this before, the term color psychology. Now, when you contrast and combine colors and fonts, you can convey a certain feeling. Certain colors convey a certain meaning as well. And this practice has been going on forever in creative industries. For example, warm colors like red and orange conveys passion. Blue and green tones are often associated with trust and loyalty. It's not only colors that tells you a certain emotion or feeling. Even certain industries actually use colors. So for example, in fast food industry, they use warm tone colors like red, yellow, orange tones. That's why you think about brands like McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, they use this type of colors. And colors like blue, gray, or black, they wouldn't use that because it would destroy your appetite. And when you think about oil and gas industry, they will go for green, black, and darker yellow tones. So you can see the colors that you choose can also change the message that you're trying to convey. So choose your colors wisely. And then we'll talk about font as well. Font is also an important part. Now, the fonts you choose also can convey different feelings from what you expect. So I want you to look at the word professional on the right. Do you think that the font represents that word well? Does it even look professional with that cursive writing? This isn't the font that I will use if I want to create an annual report and to send to all my stakeholders or to my investors. But if I use a different font, for example, this. Now look at the word professional. It looks much better now. It represents the words better. And if you think about it, I would try to give you another example. Right now, I use colors and fonts and I combine them together. So for example, if I had to create a report presentation for my stakeholders and investors, and I need to create something about health, for example, right? Now, if I use this design, what do you think is going to evoke the emotion to you? This is a nice design. It's a nice cover, but this feels more like a fashion trend report. Doesn't feel professional. Now, in contrast, if I use this design, you get it? It looks different. The blue color evokes a kind of message of trustedness, trustworthiness, seriousness. Like, this is professional. And this is how you can use contrast in your fonts, in your colors, right? In your weight, to be able to guide the heart of your audience. So as we come to an end, I just want to give a quick recap and summary about creating a visual that can connect to your audience. When you do this well, you do these two things, right? You actually leave a great impression At the same time, you also pass the message accurately. And you can do that in your visuals by using the principle of contrast. We only talk about one design principle today. There are 5 more. The different ones is you can create contrast that sparks imagination, where you tell a story using 2 contrasting images. You can also create contrast by showing the gap, giving a comparison, a scale or context. And you can also use contrast to guide the eyes and the heart by using visual hierarchy. Remember the reading flow that we went through just now? You can use fonts and color psychology to be able to create that. Now I'll close with this quote by Paul Rand. He's a renowned art director and graphic designer. He says this: without contrast, you are dead. Now it is very harsh to say this, so I will modify it slightly and say that without contrast, you are as good as dead, right? Contrast is important, okay? And so if we have more time now, let me know if I can show you a quick demo of how you can actually use different templates in Piktochat to create this as well. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and I'll just check if we have enough time to do that. I'll also chat in the chat if we have any questions. So if you ask any questions, if you have any questions. Do we have time to go through some templates?
Yeah, we do have 15 minutes. I would take the opportunity now to send in a link in the chat box. It's an MPS form and it helps us to make these sessions better every time. So if the participants could take a few seconds to fill that out, it would be great. But yeah, we do have 15 minutes. So if you want to, feel free to use these 15 minutes, whatever you want.
Sure. So I'll just, what you're doing, filling up that form, I'll just quickly share my screen to show you something. So just give me a second. Right. So yeah, this is Piktochat. And over here, you'll be able to see the different ways you can use Piktochat, different templates that we have that you can use to actually create your visuals. So again, like what I said, we are all about empowering people, professionals like yourself, to be able to tell your visuals in an impactful manner. So once you can sign up for a free account to give it a try, I'll just log into my account to give you a tour of how it looks like inside and how you can easily use this for your own stories as well. So when you come into Piktochat, you'll be able to see we have tons of formats here, from infographics, presentations, posters, reports, flyers, and etc. Now, if I click on all formats, just to give you an idea of what we have, you'll be able to see all of them here. And perhaps for most of you here who are in startup stage, or you have to pitch certain ideas to people, so I'll just put in a simple idea pitch deck, for example. And here are all the templates that we have about pitch deck, right? They are in the form of infographics, presentation. So maybe you want to talk about presentation, and you'll be able to see all the different templates available here related to pitch deck or business proposal. So by looking at it, I can also just preview and see how it looks like before committing to it. So for example, if I see something that I like this one, all right, and I would love to use it, just click on edit template and you'll be able to come to our editor. Now we've made our editor as simple as it is to be able to help you to create successful visuals. So once you come into our editor, you will be able to see the different pages that is available in this template. Pretty similar to Keynote or PowerPoint if you're familiar with those. The only difference is that we have about more than 500 templates here that you can use. So you can easily edit the text. You want to do that, right? You can add a lot of icons that we have. We have millions of icons here in Piktochat that you can use for free. We have illustrations as well, because right now the trend is actually illustration, to be able to humanize your visuals and to tell your story using illustration. So we have tons of illustrations, and these are all designed by our team that you can use to tell your story much better. And then we have photos as well that we have in collaboration with Pexels. So you can just simply search for a photo that you can use for free. We have photo frames that you can just add in to be able to just drag and drop, right? So once I have, for example, something here, I can just add a photo into this, and you can see how easy it is for you to be able to edit it, right? Or to put any picture that you want. Of course, you can add text, changing the fonts. We have tons of fun fonts in here. You can also upload your own font if you want to, changing the size and all of that. And then we have something called design components, where you could also show a list of things, all right? You could also use timelines to tell your story better. You could also use comparison, right? Comparison is a way that we talk about on how you can show contrast. Now, this is a really cool feature that I think most of you might find it helpful, especially if you're presenting numbers and data. So we have something called charts. Now, these are all the different charts that we have. And this is just an example of the chart that we have here. If you double click on this, you'll be able to actually see the different data that you can change here. So if you just add another one in here, for example, you can see the numbers being reflected directly here, right? And then, of course, you can also just link this to a Google Sheet. So if you use Google Drive, you can just link it here. And every time you update your Google Sheet, your data will be automatically reflected here as well. So that is a great win, right? We have a lot of different styles that you can use. So feel free to experiment with this if you find it helpful, especially in telling numbers that can sometimes seem boring. And also we have something called maps. So you can also add in maps of different regions and countries to tell your story, also better. And also this is probably one of the good ones that I like. We have different design colors for you as well that you can change it. And if, for example, you have a particular color, so I have a design or Republic of Work, right? Now, automatically when you upload an image, our editor will be able to take the hex code from these images and then turn it into something that you can save here, right? If you just want to change the color, for example, this is not clear for you, you can change it to black, and then you can save it, and there you go. All your design, the color has been changed, right? So this is just some things that you can use to create your visuals. You can then download this. You can also download in PDF, PNG, and send it to your friends, or you can also record and present something while you are showing this presentation. So this is Piktochat, just a really quick tour. I would encourage you to give it a try. It's a free account. You have a paid subscription if you want to level up, but start off with a free account and try creating with our 500 visuals templates that we have and see if there's something that would work for you. I hope that that would help to enhance your visual storytelling, right? So I'm just going to stop sharing here and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, there's a question by from Kate and Bakey in the group chat box.
Yes, so I see the question. Can you change the colors of icons? Yes, you can. So let me just quickly show this to you because we can't change the colors of the illustration, but for icons, we can do so. So for icons, we have mono icons that you can just change the color here, right? Oh, sorry, that's a bad color choice, right? So you can easily change it according to what you want. So even in terms of icons, we have two types of icons. We have mono icons that you can change colors, but there are certain icons that is already colored and you are unable to change the color. So yeah, we have different type of icons for you to be able to try out. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. No problem.
That was very interesting. And also the idea that you would have, you would need data. So like data to back up whatever message you're trying to convey, but also knowing that what prompts engagement and action is not always rational. That was very interesting. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that joined. We are very happy that you joined today, and we are waiting for you next week as well on Tuesday.